But when we come back, Howard is going to deal with the largest issue of the day, and one that's confusing for me, and I've laid out some questions, and I hope I go in an order where we can all understand what is happening in Indiana. We're not going to deal with Arkansas yet. We're going to stay with Indiana for a while. I'm Tony Kornheiser.
This is the Tony Kornheiser Show on ESPN 980.
I believe I had that.
Oh, it's everybody guessed that you would do this. This is Rolf somebody.
Rolf Harris.
And Watch Me Tie Me Kangaroo Down.
That's right.
Because Howard was recently in.
Right. I assume they sing this all over the place.
Oh, they do. They just go up and down the street singing that.
I can't even imagine this is the case. Get.
Now it's going to be embedded.
I could have brought you some kangaroo jerky, but I gave the kangaroo jerky to somebody else. So what I brought you is genuine Billabong brand Australian crocodile jerky.
Crocodile jerky, everybody wants that.
Which you probably want. The ingredients are crocodile meat, sugar, water, soy sauce. So it's vacuum packed, so you can have it whenever you want.
No,
I'm
thanks.
probably never going to have
let's
it.
put it in
I'm
the
not
prize
a big
pile.
Oh, yeah,
fan.
I think this should be one of the prizes for the
We'll
NCAA
do
bracket.
that one.
And the other thing I brought, which was just a souvenir and not the result of actual activity, is the souvenir
Cricket World
Cup, which was going on down there.
Oh,
Yeah.
And I really wanted to go to a match just so I could discuss the fine points of cricket with Nigel.
Right.
But we kept missing. We were traveling around the country, and we kept missing the events. But it was all being held in Australia and New Zealand, and it was an Aussie-Kiwi final, which nobody ever would have expected, because that's not...
ESPN was running highlights of that every day.
Right.
They were, from the Sri Lanka team and the British team and the Indian team, running highlights every day.
I believe Australia ended up winning the whole thing.
Australia won,
Yes.
which was a huge thing down there, but did get the souvenir program that you might want to peruse.
Well, we'll do that. We will certainly. We're in the perusing mode at some point.
And while you're eating the beef, the crocodile jerky.
Crocodile jerky, which is everything you can want. So let us get to, because of your expertise as the trans global political expert at the Huffington Post, let us get to this Indiana law, which is so controversial and which the governor, Mike Pence, is trying to move away from as fast as he can, linguistically anyway. I think he has supported the overall notion of it, but he knows it has to be fixed. And they want to fix it before the Final Four starts. They really
Their
do.
deadline is tip time.
Yeah. So let us start with the basics of what is, as you understand it, what is the new Indiana law?
Okay, I'm going to back up just slightly and say that this conflict is eternal in American life between the freedom of religious practice, which is one of the founding principles of the country, the reason people came here initially, at least the white people, and the notion that everybody's entitled to be judged as a person based on the destiny that made them what they are and shouldn't be discriminated against. We've been trying to fix the initial problems of that go back to slavery ever since. Now, those two aren't always in conflict. They aren't generally necessarily in conflict, but they are right now. And the reason that they are is gay marriage. Mm-hmm. Not the existence of gays, but gay marriage. That's what's brought this to a boil. And there are now, mostly as a result of court decisions, 37 states that allow and recognize gay marriage.
We have no federal law on this yet.
There's no federal law on this yet.
So it's state by state.
37 states. There are 13 states that ban gay marriage. Okay, so clearly the number of states that allow it have grown, and a court in Indiana last fall upheld gay marriage and said yes, you can have gay marriage in Indiana. Indiana's an interesting state. It's kind of conservative politically, culturally, and politically. And yet, as the Hoosiers say, Hoosier hospitality. So that's the background of it. I think Mike Pence was looking for a way, the conservative, very conservative culturally governor of the state was looking for a way to show that he wasn't going to take the court action lying down, and that he was going to push for a way to pass a law that would be popular with those who are frightened and think that the world is falling apart if there's gay marriage. That's the background. So how do they go about doing that? Well, in 1993, the federal government and Bill Clinton, when Bill Clinton became president, passed a Religious Freedom Act, a federal Religious Freedom Act that was basically designed to say that government can't get in the way of religious practice, and to sort of put the fingers on the scale a little bit to protect religious practice on things like Muslim federal prison guards being allowed to wear beards, or churches being allowed to distribute food to the homeless in public parks. It was that kind of thing. It was a feel-good thing. It wasn't particularly controversial. It passed overwhelmingly everywhere. But that was before the whole gay rights movement grew up. Now what's happening is that those who oppose gay marriage are using state versions of that law to try to give individuals and corporations now the right to object on religious grounds if somebody forces them to serve or do things for, among others, gay people.
How does this differ from the Supreme Court decision on the Hobby Lobby?
Well, that's part of what's happening here. There are 19 states now that have a religious freedom law, because the Supreme Court said that the federal law that was passed in 1993 doesn't apply to the states, that it's just federal law. Mm-hmm. It's to keep the federal government off the back of religious practice. But the Supreme Court said, no, that only applies to the federal government. States need to pass their own if they want them. So 19 states have passed these. The Indiana one is different from and more sweeping than the other 19.
Virginia has one.
Yes, but most of the states that passed these also have laws on the books that protect sexual orientation in some way. In other words, they classify sexual orientation along with race and gender and so forth
as exempt from this law.
Exempt from the law. Mm-hmm. Indiana does not have such a statute, so there are fewer defenses, the gay rights people argue, in Indiana, which is true. The other difference is that in the other states and in the federal law, the basic thrust of it is to prevent government from doing things that people find objectionable on religious grounds. This one allows individuals and corporations to kind of bring actions against each other, kind of have a private war over this stuff without the government being involved at all. And that is a big difference between what's going on in Indiana and elsewhere. But keep in mind, Tony, all of this is mostly about politics, not about the fine points of the law. But the Indiana law is qualitatively different and more expansive than other ones.
And that's what I want to get to, because there has been an outcry from people like the CEO of Apple, from the Indianapolis Star, from Terry McAuliffe, the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, inviting Indiana businesses to Virginia, from the governor of Connecticut, who is preventing Kevin Ollie, the defending national champion, from going to Indianapolis, where he'd have accolades thrown at him. He can't go now because so many people are offended by this law. So what I need to know specifically is, how does it permit discrimination? How?
Well, because Indiana doesn't have a law that says that sexual orientation is something that needs to be specially protected or looked at by the courts, the scales are tipped a little bit against same-sex couples or others asserting their rights in lawsuits and so forth.
Even though they have the right to marry in Indiana?
Yes, even though they have the right to marry in Indiana. So the way it would work is a company could say, because we are a religiously oriented, because the ownership of this country is religiously oriented, has deeply held, let's say, evangelical conservative beliefs, and that was the Hobby Lobby. There was the Supreme Court. The other thing that's happened that makes Indiana different is a lot of these other state statutes were passed years ago Now you have the Hobby Lobby case, which says that the Hobby Lobby company did not have to provide contraceptive coverage in its health care plan.
But that's a lot different than refusing to make a wedding cake for somebody.
I know, but it's a religious. It was a religious grounds that they were able to assert. So in this case, in theory, the cake maker, the flower people, you can think of other ways in which somebody might be denied service because the individual or the company, the corporation, says, we're not going to provide our service to gay people because it's against our religious beliefs to do that.
Okay, so Jeannie and I were talking about this before we went on the air today, and this is our conflict. Mm-hmm. We don't automatically think that because you claim the moral high ground on your religious beliefs, we don't automatically think that makes you a bad person.
No.
We don't automatically think that because there are civil laws out there protecting groups of people, we don't automatically think that gives you all the high ground.
No.
We see, Jeannie and I, and we see conflict here. We're not sure that we have to automatically say to these religious people, you're bigots.
No,
and I think that's how it's been framed.
It definitely is how it's been framed.
How is this? How does one resolve? And even though we tend to be liberal, how's it resolved?
Okay, the other problem in Indiana it was pointed out during the consideration of this law in Indianapolis in the legislature. It was pointed out that this could give special protection to corporations and individuals who might be sued by a gay person or a gay couple for not providing services. It puts the finger on the scale.
Well, a lot of people.
So wait a minute. So then the people negotiating the language of the bill said, well, let's put a line in here. Let's put language in here saying nothing in here shall be allowed to be used as an excuse to discriminate against gays and lesbians. And they refused, the legislature refused to put that language in. The argument was made that Indiana doesn't have an overall statute that gives some kind of special protection to sexual orientation. So they wanted to write it in the bill, and Mike Pence said, no, we're not putting it in the bill. So this issue was on the table then.
Okay, well, because what I was going to say is this, and I understand why people feel this way, because I feel this way, because I'm old enough to remember World War II. That first you come for one group, and then you come for another group, and then you come for another group, and then you come for another group. And this becomes policy. It's written into a state group of laws that you can go after them, so pretty soon you're going to come after me. So I want to resist this law. What is the language fix that Mike Pence keeps talking about? And it seems to me that if you wrote in that one sentence, if the Indiana people reverse themselves on that one sentence, then it protects everybody.
Yes, I agree, but Mike Pence doesn't want to admit, my sense of it is that he doesn't want to admit that there was any intent to do that in the beginning. And it's hard not to see that there was such an intent because they refused to put that language in there.
Sure.
So they're going to put in language, they're going to put in more generalized language of some kind that he thinks will allow him to fix it without having to admit that he made a mistake.
What I don't understand is if you're an arts and crafts store, if you're a bakery, your religious beliefs are not inherent in the construction and the makeup of your company, right, as it would be the case for a Catholic hospital, which is the most obvious one. Mm-hmm. So how can a bakery sort of suddenly declare itself to maintain these religious principles that would prohibit it from baking a cake for a gay marriage? Is this something that you can just kind of raise your flag and say, okay, I'm a bakery, but these are my deeply held religious beliefs?
Well, that's the concern, that they in fact would be able to do that. And while the Hobby Lobby case was about something central to the religious beliefs of the owners of the company,
and clearly stated for years,
that they don't want to provide contraceptive services under their insurance plan, and the Supreme Court sided with them. Mm-hmm. So the concern is that while that was very much focused on a core religious belief and a core religious practice, that's opening the door to much more broad interpretations. And to complicate it, the federal law says that it doesn't have to be a core belief. It can be on the fringes of the religious practice. So I completely agree with you that it's important to protect religious freedom. Nobody anticipated when that law was passed in 93 by practically unanimous vote that gay marriage would arise as the kind of thing that presents a deep affront to a lot of traditional religious people. That's just the fact. And what's going to happen is that the Supreme Court is going to have to settle this. There's a Supreme Court.
That's where it's going to go.
Well, there is one. There is a Supreme Court case that's going to be argued next month that will be decided in June that will once and for all, I think, say whether gay marriage is accepted as constitutional law in the United States.
Okay.
So we wait for that, and then that takes away the problem with the next Final Four. But,
just keep in mind, Tony,
be.
that the details of the statutes and all that, which I've been trying to go through, are less important than the fact that this is a huge political contest.
Well, it has enormous economic impact on the state.
Yeah, and it's all about the politics, and the Republicans, I think are in a bad way.
I think what Jeannie and I have said is that we think that these are long-held principles by a lot of people on both sides, and to automatically assign bigotry to either side.
Well, I think that's completely unfair. I agree with you.
We'll take a break. We will come back with Kevin and news. I'm Tony Kornheiser.
This is the Tony Kornheiser Show.
The Tony Kornheiser Show.